Hello, Poly 100. If you can believe it, we are finished with the election. I know that for many, myself included, it feels like such a relief. It felt like one of the longest campaign cycles that I've ever gone through. I think in part because we were all home and so, on edge about every breaking news alert. But all that being said, I think there's no better time to talk about special interest groups than this week. I know that for the past few weeks, Dr. Anson and myself, along with the UMBC community broadly, and almost every network that you would go onto, every platform, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, we're all trying to drive home the point of the importance of registering to vote, making a plan to vote, and following through with that vote. Well, if you needed a reminder of the importance of being an engaged and active and involved participant in democracy beyond just voting, let this be it. There is so much work we have to do, and I hope that in the coming weeks, months, years, you'll think about what impact you want to have more broadly in the community. And certainly voting is an incredible crux of who we are as people, of what it means to be in a democracy. But I would also argue that what we do beyond voting is equally, if not more important. And so this week, talking about special interest groups, I think most clearly emphasizes this point. What are you going to do beyond voting? And certainly I'm going to give a lot of plugs, shameless plugs to events that are happening. But I think one of the most easiest transitions for us to talk about this is actually thinking ahead and preparing for the Maryland legislative session, which will begin in January. So the Maryland General Assembly, the folks we elect to represent us for state politics. This begins in January. It is a 90-day session, and it goes until April. Today, I want to talk about one bill in particular that was actually passed in 2018. And if you're ever in Annapolis and you ask about this bill, people will tell you it is because of the hard work of coalition building, advocacy groups, special interest groups, that this bill was passed in the end. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the Maryland Healthy Working Families Act. So to begin with, I did give a spoiler alert that this bill was eventually signed into law in 2018. The bill would provide 1 hour of paid sick leave if your business had 15 or more employees. If you had 14 or fewer employees, you had to provide 1 hour of unpaid sick and safe leave for every 30 hours that an employee was going to work. Now, I want to point out the two gentlemen in the photo wearing capes. Aside from the fact that this was one of the very successful tactics used by the special interest groups, and I'll touch on that later, these two gentlemen were the main sponsors of the bill throughout multiple years. So on your left, you're going to see Delegate Luke Clippinger of Baltimore City. He, at the time, sat on the Judicial Committee, and he's now actually the chair, so an incredibly important man in Annapolis. And then on the right-hand side, you actually see Senator Mac Middleton, who on the time sat on the Finance Committee and was from Charles County. He actually lost his re-election in 2018, so he got this done all before being beat out in a primary. However, it's really important to know that the work of these advocates was long coming. It took almost 6 years for this bill to be passed. The bill was first introduced in a very different form in 2012, and throughout each session thereafter, it was introduced. In 2017, it passed both chambers. And so, as you remember from our legislative chapter, after the House and the Senate pass bill, it goes to the executive, or in our case in Maryland, Governor Hogan. Governor Hogan had repeatedly from the beginning said, if this bill comes to my desk, it is dead on arrival. He believed it to be job killing, and that it would force small businesses and lay off employees, or even shut the doors of small business. So he was not a fan of this bill. And certainly when we think about the composition of the legislative chambers, it makes sense why there might have been this tension introduced by two Democrats. And certainly Governor Hogan is a Republican. And going into that, I would be remiss if I didn't say that there were actually two bills introduced in 2017. And it's important to know that it was the Common Sense Paid Leave Act introduced by Governor Hogan versus the Maryland Healthy Working Families Act. Now, of course, we know the Maryland Healthy Working Families Act is the one that was actually passed. Governor Hogan's bill was not. And I provided this graph on the right to give an understanding of the differences between the bills. And certainly you can take some time to pause and read the description from the Capitol News Service. But essentially, Governor Hogan's bill would have only given this benefit, essentially, to full-time employees, whereas the Maryland Healthy Working Families Act was to full-time and part-time. All right, so just some slight policy differences, and certainly there's a lot more deeper if you did want to get into that as well. All right, but we're thinking about the special interests behind this group. And when you have been reading and listening to Dr. Anson's lectures, I'm sure that you're getting home the point that the economic interests that a group or a coalition, multiple groups would share, that economic interest can be a very salient and motivating main purpose for political action. And certainly in this case, that was incredibly true. If you have never been to Annapolis, I would say you're missing out for a lot of reasons. And one of them is to get a sense for the energy, the electricity that comes from having so many activists and advocacy groups roaming throughout the halls. All right, they say when you are in that 90-day session, you see democracy in action. You see so many people there. And in this photo on the screen, we see Delegate Luke Clippinger, again, one of the main sponsors of the bill. And this group was called Working Matters. They were essentially a coalition of faith, labor, family groups coming together and saying, Governor Hogan, we need you to sign this bill. This bill is good for X, Y, Z reasons, right? So we know labor unions are incredibly active. If you even see on this photo, and if you've gotten involved in Maryland politics, you'll see folks from NARAL, pro-choice Maryland, right? So reproductive rights were coming in, all kind of centering on this justice focus. Now, when we are thinking about special interest groups, a lot of people will say, does it enhance democracy? Is it leading to too much influence in politics? There's actually a lot of Federalist papers written about this. I believe James Madison wrote quite a bit about interest groups and their involvement with government. But I wanted to give you a quick preview of some of the folks who were actually involved with this effort. And on the left, you'll see all of their names, all coming together, all believing in this bill. And let me talk about some of their advocacy tactics, because as many people will tell you, this is really where the rubber met the road for these groups. So at the beginning of this slide, we saw, and I'll just go back for clarity's sake, we see these kids and we see these legislators wearing capes. And this is really how they got it passed. They had moms and their children come to Annapolis on Groundhog Day, I believe it was. And they had the children wear superhero capes. They tried to get the legislators to wear superhero capes, all organized by this group called Moms Rising. They would go in, they would give a storybook to the legislative aides or the legislators if they could get to them. We all know the legislators are pulled in many directions and are incredibly busy during that 90-day session. And they would detail the importance of earned sick leave, right? So we kind of think about, why use kids? Was that a good framing tactic? And arguably it was, right? They were trying to emphasize the point that paid sick leave would really help parents pay their bills and let them stay home with any sick kids that they had, take care of their kids when they became ill. and they would give these booklets to lawmakers with testimonials of people, and they would try to persuade them that even business owners are supporting us, this vision of paid sick leave, including also maternity and paternity leave. So going back to some of the groups that were involved, you see here, right, a lot of labor energy, a lot of labor groups coming in. But what you don't see here is some of these professional lobbies, right, that they're seeking to further their interests. So some of the folks who opposed this bill, who would have provided testimony saying, we urge you vote no against this bill. So we had a coalition of business advocates, the National Federation of Independent Business, the Maryland Retailers Association, the Chamber of Commerce, vote at large in Maryland and in each local county as well. So a good bit of opposition. What do you think? Do you think these special interest groups enhance democracy? Did they make it clear to the legislators that this is something the will of the people wanted? It all depends on your persuasion, I suppose, right? But as we're thinking forward to the next legislative session, I wanted to leave you on this note. What do you think might be coming up in the 2021 Assembly? They've already issued guidance that it will be primarily virtual. I also want to give a quick shout out. I put up the photo of the bill passing in the House, and I did that primarily because the Speaker of the House of Delegates is Delegate Adrienne Jones, a very proud UMBC alumna. So we're proud to have her there supporting us. What do you think is coming up in the session, right? Considering COVID, the election, the long overdue reckoning of racial justice that this country is going through. How do you think you see yourself involved in this idea of democracy beyond just voting? And with that, I'll end on just a final plug. If you are interested in this, please know that there is an event being organized coming up on Wednesday, November 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. It's called After the Election, a conversation with the UMBC legislators. So you'll actually meet the folks who represent UMBC in our State House, where we've just been talking about. If that interests you, certainly keep your eyes out. It is on my UMBC on social media as well. And as always, citation is feminist memory, a credit to the sources and to all the folks who were so deeply involved in this effort that it was ended up on the governor's desk, vetoed, and they rallied to make sure that it was actually put into law. That's all for now, Poly 100. Take care.